Welcome to part one of a three-part series where we'll be ranking the off-season moves of these teams. I'll probably do another one of these in maybe like a month or so when like everything is finalized and we have like everyone's full roster. But I just thought I'd do it now to fill time, basically. But yeah, we're going to be using obviously the spreadsheet. Praise be spreadsheet. Thank you, Flynn, for the spreadsheet. All hail the spreadsheet. And just ranking these teams in a tier list on what I think they do. Now, for me, I'll be ranking it based off what I think their ideal situation from the end of last year to like what's their ideal, and we won't be taking like financial situations into account or anything like that because I don't know the team's financial situations, so I can't know that stuff. But we'll just be ranking it on what I think ideally the situation could have been for each of these teams. So let's dive into our first team then, which is everyone's favorite team, Sentinels, who are mostly keeping it together, as I'm sure many of you are already aware. The only change is Marv going out and bringing in John QT from M80, and Zeltis also was signed as a sub. But that is it. That's the only thing that they have changed. And I know that a lot of people will be pretty high on Sentinels, as everyone always is in any offseason, of course, because, it's Sentinels, and people want Sentinels to be good, and the addition of John QT, a good IGL from Tier 2 who proved himself last year, is reuniting with Kaplan because they used to be together on Ghost Gaming as well, right? So there's familiarity there as well. Everything looks good. There's no way this goes wrong, right? Well, I think that John QT definitely will help them, for sure. It might help the rolls out as well, where John QT generally plays Sentinels, and so Pancada, you would assume, is going to go back to Smokes, which I think would be a very good thing. But I definitely still have some reservations about this team. And to me, the reservations are, you've kept 4 of the 5 players and the same coaching staff on a team that didn't do that much last year. And I know that that will, hurt some of you to say that or whatever, but, the fact is, the Sentinels team, most of the people who are here on this team, it didn't go that well, right? And I know that obviously you might say, yeah, but with the role changes and now you bring in like a proper IGL again, right? Who knows what they're doing? It could definitely go better. And I definitely can see that argument for it going better, but the other side of this is, what if, 10, Sassy Pancada, if they play at the level that they did last year, I don't see how that's going to, miraculously take Sentinels, if John QT is, unless he's playing out of his absolute mind, I don't see how that's going to carry them to the top of the Americas League if that is the case. Now, you can obviously make the argument that that's not going to be the case and that they will be playing better, and maybe that will come true. But that is my reservation with Sentinels, where, will it actually come to fruition? And so for Sentinels, then, I'm going to put them at the top of B tier. Now, I could hear an argument for low A tier as well, for sure. But as I said, I just still have some reservations. Let's put it this way. I just need to see it from Sentinels. I just need to see it first before I can truly believe it, because a lot of people believe without seeing it with this team, but I need to see it. Our next team is EG. And, well, let's talk about EG. Remember, we are ranking this off what is their ideal. And their ideal for EG was very simple. You just keep the roster together. In fact, I would say the ideal for EG is you keep the roster together and you have a 10-man roster next year. I know a lot of people, might disagree with me on the 10-man roster stuff, but I think it's a very good idea. That, I think, would be that ideal, right? You just keep everything the same. You won champs. That seems is probably not going to play out, although we don't really know what's going on. Apparently, a lot of these EG players are in contract jail, and, EG are just being a mess, as they tend to be. And so, yeah, I don't exactly know what is going to happen here. It says that Boostio has gone here on the spreadsheet. Maybe Giacomo, maybe Karma have gone. Maybe even Demon 1 and Ethan will go too, right? Like, it's all up in the air, and we have literally no idea how this is going to play out. And in fact, other teams are basically, it seems, waiting on EG or waiting on this contract jail situation to get resolved, or, to figure out exactly how this is going to play out. But yeah, it's a very rough situation for EG, and so to me, this one is no surprise with what I'm going to do, because EG had a chance here to really, make a long-lasting legacy. And so, you know what, I think D tier is even too high for them. I'm going to make a new tier called, I'm going to call it EG, and we're going to put them down here. Let's change the color to like a gray, like just like a, not even competing level. Yeah, I like this. Yeah, I like even it being darker here than the rest as well. So yeah, EG are going in the EG tier. And our next team here is Leviathan, who obviously made some big splashes here. They got rid of Shai and Takulia and the coach Onur as well. They brought in Aspas, of course, Tex as well, and Gokt, who was the assistant coach of Koi last year. I can't say I know too much about Gokt in general, but I guess we'll see how it goes. And for Leviathan, when, we're kind of picturing, like, what would Leviathan's ideal be? Well, they've kept a pretty solid core of King, Nozra, and Mazzino, which, yeah, I don't mind. They brought in Aspas, which obviously is like, you bring in like a top 5 player in the world, like, yeah, that's always going to be a good thing. Like, I don't think many people would disagree. That's a good thing. And Tex is a weird one. Obviously, I'm really happy for Tex that he made it to tier 1 because, he deserved it. This is not the team I think most people would have expected it to happen with, but I'm just glad that he has found a team. You would assume it's going to be an English-speaking roster here. And also with the getting rid of Onur, there was like kind of, I think, a feeling of like, that kind of very disciplined style that Ono brought, that maybe, that kind of come to an end, and Leviathan just looked kind of, as the season went on, they kind of ended up looking worse and worse, and maybe it was just fatigue and stuff like that, that it just wasn't working anymore. So I think making a coaching change was probably the right choice. You bring in a top 5 player, Tex was a good tier 2 player last year as well, so really all of these changes make sense. There are still some questions for me, like who's going to play Sentinel on this roster? Probably Tex if I had to guess, but I don't know. And also, they are going to be speaking English, which, I think most of these players wouldn't have been on an English-speaking roster before, and will that cause any problems? So for Leviathan, then, I'm going to be putting them in the A tier, I think. Because of those problems, maybe, with no Sentinel player, with, maybe some language problems. I'm not going to put them all the way in S, but I think, obviously, it looks pretty good for Leviathan. And now on to Cloud9, and I know a lot of people won't be too pleased with what Cloud9 have done. Obviously, they got rid of Zelsis, Leaf, and Rooney, and their coach MCE as well. They bring in Oxy, Vanity, Whippy, and the coach Imi. And for me, again, we're basing this off what Cloud9's ideal could have been. I think for me, if like money, no issue, Cloud9's ideal probably would have been keeping most of it together and maybe making like 1, maybe 2 changes, right? And keeping most of it together, right? Definitely the core together. They have not done that, of course. They bring back Vanity after cutting Vanity, which, might be seen as a bit of a weird move. They get rid of MCE despite, rumors of going kind of more down a budget direction. You get rid of MC, who is known for being good with budget roster. Like, some odd decisions, let's say, from Cloud9, and I know a lot of people probably feel like the ceiling isn't that high for this team. And so for Cloud9, I am going to put them in the D tier. It's not even that I don't have that much faith in their actual roster, because I do think that, if you made me guess, like, I think most likely they finish like around 8th, maybe 7th, 8th, somewhere in there. And just miss out on playoffs. I think that actually is where I feel like they'll probably finish. And I know that's probably higher than some of you. But again, from where the ideal is for Cloud9, which, it isn't that difficult to squint your eyes and say just keep most of it together. Like, if you weren't cheaping out, that's a very reasonable thing to do, to just keep most of it together, maybe make 1 change. And that to me would have been their ideal. And instead they've ended up in a very different direction that I don't think is better than their previous roster. Okay, now on to Loud, and obviously for this one, Aspas has gone to Leviathan, so that's the one player they are missing. They got rid of their coach, Fraud, apparently due to language issues. That is just a lie, I think. I just don't see how that's true in any way, shape, or form. And on the spreadsheet here, it has, there's a rumor that Sadak is going to become the head coach. If that does happen, and Sadak did become the head coach, that would be the worst move of the offseason, I think. Because there's just, I don't see any logic behind it whatsoever, right? At least with like even EG, Cloud9, right? At least there's like monetary issues, right? That you can kind of like point at and be like, at least there is a reason that they are doing it. Whereas moving Sadak to head coach doesn't make any sense, right? Sadak's still a good player, and he's going to have a lot more influence on how the game goes from inside the IGL chair rather than the head coach chair, right? So that wouldn't make any sense whatsoever for me, but apparently that's not going to happen, and they are just looking for 1 player and a head coach. To me, the ideal for Loud would have been just keeping it together, right? You've got a young team, with 1 experienced leader in Sadak, right? They were already one of the best teams in the world. I think with just an extra year of, getting used to playing with each other, and, particularly for Cow and C and Tui's, right? Getting them, just continuing on that path would have been the ideal for Loud. Instead, they haven't gone that direction, and so I am a little bit wary of exactly what they're going to do. And so for that reason, I'm going to put Loud in the C tier. It's not a disaster, but obviously whoever you bring in to replace Aspas is probably not going to be... In fact, they're definitely not going to be as good as Aspas. So yeah, they're just going to go in the C tier because yeah, it hasn't gone great, but it's not a disaster either. Okay, next up is Crew, who have mostly kept it the same with Kesnick, Klaus, and Melsa, but they bring in Shy and MTA, and they keep the coaching staff pretty much the same as well. Now, Shy, I definitely like as a pickup. You know, he's shown himself to be a pretty good player overall, and I like keeping Kesna and Melsa for sure. Klaus is an interesting one, and there was rumors they were going to get rid of Klaus, but then he ends up on the roster, which he had a pretty poor most of the season, but then played well in LCQ. Should that be enough to keep your job? Debatable, maybe. But if there isn't a better option, then, you know, keep him. That's fine, I guess. And now let's talk about MTA. Because I'm not really clued up on, you know, the LATAM tier 2 scene or whatever. This is MTA. He was playing for a team called Furious Gaming. This is all the games he has played, right? Not many whatsoever. In terms of agents and stuff, he's mostly a Jet player with a little bit of Raze in there as well. So a duelist player here. And honestly, like, you know, just looking at the numbers, and look, the numbers sometimes can lie, but the numbers aren't, you know, amazing here necessarily. So interesting pickup, and you have Kesnet, who I assume is going to be playing duelist most of the time, so there's probably a role change in here as well for MTA. So who knows? I can't really speak to how this will go, but it seems a bit of a weird pickup, but maybe he was very good in scrims. Who knows? And so for that Crew, I think I'm going to put in the B tier. There's definitely still some question marks, as I said, with MTA, bit of an unknown and whatnot. And this whole team is a bit of a question mark, because obviously they were so bad during the start of the season, but then pretty good during LCQ, but then Champs wasn't great either. It's like, you know, a bit of a roller coaster here with how Crew could be. I think overall, you know, this is a solid attempt, right? They kept Kesnet, which I think is good. Keeping Melser, I think, is good as well. The coaching staff, obviously, Crew definitely improved with their coaching staff as it kind of went on there. So, you know, there are definitely still some signs of life here, but still some question marks as well. Okay, 100 Thieves, which is a difficult one because they're keeping Cryo, Asner, and Bang, it seems. Letting go of Stella and Derek. They have confirmed their new head coach, Ziggs, who's from EG. And Mike's apparently is going to be the assistant coach as well. And then we've got Common Boostio on here, and it says unlikely. And the reason for that is because of this EG contract jail stuff. And, you know, who knows how that will play out, and this is why it makes it very difficult for 100 Thieves for me to rate them, right? Because if they did get Common Boostio, that's obviously very good. But if the EG contract jail locks them away from 100 Thieves, and then they have to, like, panic pivot and have to find a new IGL as well, like, you know, that's obviously a massive problem. So it's difficult to kind of talk about this team in terms of, like, the way it could go, because if they did get the players, very good. If not, then, you know, it could be chaos and whatnot. Keeping Cryo, Aster, and Bang, you know, I think is a perfectly reasonable decision. I think at any point, you know, at different points, those players have all shown that they can play at a very, very high level. It didn't happen last year, though, right? So that will be kind of a big thing for 100 Thieves is if those three play, you know, at the average level they were last year, they're in, you know, it's not going to probably be that great. But if they can play at their highest level, then, you know, 100 Thieves, you know, particularly if they did add Common Boostio, would obviously be looking like an absolute mega team. And so for that reason, I'm going to put 100 Thieves in the B tier, because at this point, it's just difficult to exactly know what's going on. The changes that they made, the players that they let go probably make sense. And, you know, the head coaching change as well probably made some sense. But it still could go very bad because of the EG contract jail. Okay, for Furia here, this one is a bit weird for me. They've let go of DG and QCK and Mazin as well. And they promoted Conan from their bench, who's now IGLing for them. They've made a head coaching change, and they brought in Liazzi, who's like a raise one trick, and Havoc from the Union, who I thought was actually pretty good. So, you know, Havoc, I think, is a good pickup. And MW and Khalil, you know, definitely had moments where they showed, you know, what they can do. Liazzi is a weird one, just because of, like, you know, the roles and stuff, but maybe could be a good player. But again, I would doubt, are you better than DG? I would have my doubts. And then Conan IGLing as well, I find, is a weird one, because if you thought that Conan, like, if you think that Conan is this good to, like, IGL, why was he on your bench anyway? Right? Like, why? Like, if you really do believe, like, in this guy and this IGLing, then why was he not just IGLing for, like, find a way to do it last year? Right? I find that kind of an odd thing. And that's not to say Conan is a bad player or a bad IGL. but it just makes it kind of weird why you weren't doing that last year if you have so much faith in this, right? So yeah, again, if we're looking at Furia, like what was their ideal, I'm not sure that this was it. Making a couple changes, maybe in a head coaching change, I don't know. Maybe that was the right way to go, but there's some weird things going on here. So for that reason, I'm going to put Furia in the C tier as well. Where it still could go well, right? But to me, like DG definitely is like a tier 1 level player and has shown that multiple times. And honestly, I think we're just a little bit of like reining him in. He could have even been like a top 10 player in the world at times, but you get rid of him and now I don't know, it feels a little weird. I'm not going to say that Fury are going to be a bad team by any means next year, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the ideal for them either. Okay, moving on to G2, who are just mostly keeping it together, of course, and Tex went to Leviathan, and so it's rumored that they want to bring in Jorgmo, which would be a massive get. Obviously, Jorgmo, world champion, great player, would be really great for G2 in general. My only real question is, and this isn't really that big of a question, I don't think, I guess Jorgmo would be like the upper on this team. I know Net has done a bit of it. Like if you want to play Chamber, I know Net's done a bit of that. Would it be Jorgmo, who's, you know, mostly a Raze? You know, if you wanted to play Jet on maps like Breeze or whatever, or Ascent, like, you know, I think that would still probably be a possibility. Who plays that? That would really be my only question. But, you know, Jorgmo is obviously a great player, and I think the rest of G2, X of the God, have proven themselves at this point. So I'm pretty hyped. And so for G2, I'm actually going to put them in S tier, because I just think, like, okay, what was G2's ideal? You know, you keep the roster together probably. Okay, you had to lose Tex. You bring in like a great player in Jorgmo. If that does happen, like, yeah, sounds like a pretty good plan. As I said, I only have like one little like thing of the roles and whatnot, but other than that, I think it's, you know, looking pretty good. Okay, next up to NRG, and well, they have got rid obviously of Artis, FNS, and Som. And when you're looking at what the ideal for NRG is, a lot of people I think would have said, well, you know, you keep the 4 together, you probably get rid of Artis, and you bring in someone, right? I think most people would have said that's the ideal. I'm actually not sure if that is the case for NRG. I'm actually wondering if maybe the whole, like, you know, optic kind of core that they had, maybe that had run its course, right? Because I just think, like, you know, obviously the season kind of ended on a very sour note, right? Losing to BLG. And I do just wonder, like, you know, had that just run its course in general with that, not that they, you know, dislike each other or anything, but, you know, just in terms of, like, were they ever going to be challenging to, like, win an international tournament again as that group? And I think you could make an argument that, you know, that probably maybe wasn't going to be the case. So honestly, I don't mind the decision to split up NRG here. You know, if that's the way they wanted to go, I think maybe that makes sense. And so they have signed Marved back, you know, to make sure they got 3 of that optic core at all times. But then, you know, Demon 1 and Ethan could be in the EG contract jail. Maybe they'll go to NRG. Who knows? If obviously they did get Demon 1 and Ethan, that would be pretty crazy. But if they don't, then obviously you could be in some trouble as well. So for this, I think we're going to have to do the same that we did with 100 Thieves, where I'm just going to have to go and put NRG in this B tier of kind of an unknown, where, you know, who knows what will happen. Again, who's going to be IGLing for this team is a bit of a question mark. But it could go well. It could go very badly, though. And then finally, we come to MIBR, who are keeping most of their team together, or at least a core of the team, with JCZ, RGL, and FRZ, with BZK still as the coach. You bring in Mazian from Furia and Artsian from the Nation, which are okay pickups. Like, you know, they're both probably like tier 1 level players. But obviously keeping the core of a team that did so poorly last year, and I know that they won a couple games, and the Chosen Knife is a moment that everyone, of course, remembers and whatever. But keeping this together, I think, is a weird one for me. Because it just didn't work, right? And it didn't work, and they also, it wasn't like a lot of these games were close. For a lot of MIBR's game, they got kind of stomped. And, you know, that's not a good sign at all. And so keeping most of it together, do I think that, you know, these other players coming in are going to be enough to, like, overcome that? I have my doubts. And so I'm not thrilled with what MIBR have done. And so for that reason, I think I'm going to put MIBR in the D tier as well, where I just think there was probably better options. You know, starting fresh maybe was just going to be a better choice for them. And so they will go into the D tier. And so that was part 1 of 3 of and so that was part 1 of a 3-part series, really, where we'll be doing EMEA and Pacific in the upcoming days as well, and taking a look at them. And as I said, in about a month's time, or whenever, you know, everything kind of fully gets finalized, we'll probably do this again with more information, and maybe EG will, you know, finally figure out exactly what they're doing, and other teams can finalize their rosters.